share a little bit about who we are at the American Library. For those of you who know us, this will be a reminder, and for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, I'd be thrilled to tell you that we are the largest English language lending library on the European continent. We're also a cultural centre and event space, and though we are open to the public at the moment, we've been hosting our events for obvious reasons on Zoom. We are an independent nonprofit, and we thrive and survive on the support of our community and generous donors. So thank you very much in advance to those of you who have already supported us, and thank you to those who will continue to support us. To learn more about the library, please visit our homepage, or you can connect with us on our social media accounts. We have Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Finally, I'm very excited to announce that for the first time at Evenings with an Author, we are premiering our exciting new experiment, which is at the end of the event, if you have time, and you are also excited by the prospect of this, we invite you to stay on the call on the event, and we will put you in a random breakout room with somebody else who's also on the call. This way, we think one of the joys of events, in-person events, is meeting serendipitously other people who have similar interests with you. So if you're interested in this and you have a spare 10 minutes, it will only be about 10 minutes at the end of the event. We invite you to stay on the call, and you'll be put in a breakout room, which is just a small kind of conversation size format. And you can have a conversation with someone who also was here this evening, as if we were in person. So without further ado, we should get started, and I will be introducing Cara, and then she and I will begin to talk. So Cara Black is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author, known for her Aimé Le Duc series. Black, through her writing, marries a deep love for France with meticulous attention to detail and immersive research. She earned a Médaille de la Ville de Paris, a Paris City Medal, for her contributions to French culture, and she is a leading name in the contemporary French crime literary scene. 3 Hours in Paris, voila, is Black's first standalone novel. The book, which was named a Best Mystery of 2020 by the Washington Post, reimagines Adolf Hitler's brief visit to Paris in June of 1940. The thriller follows a young American markswoman, Kate, on her task to assassinate the Führer at the start of the Second World War. Miles away from her home of rural Oregon and against a backdrop of recently occupied Paris, Kate fights for her life, and she fights too for the fate of the Western world. Cara, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And so you're calling in from rainy San Francisco?
Yes, foggy San Francisco, as usual. Thank you, Alice. Bonsoir, everyone. It's bonjour from here, but it's lovely to be with you. I wish I could be, in person with you at the American Library, as I did in 2019, pre-COVID. But we're here together. And I just want to give a quick shout out. I see Heather Stimler right there. Hey, Heather. I remember her. I was in that apartment before she painted those walls that color. So, but I like it.
Hello,
Heather's in the 13th. So, yeah.
Lovely. Cara, we, to start, tell us why you wrote this book.
Right, sure. Well, I many reasons, but I think, when I grew up, people in my family had served in the armed forces. And I mean, they were much older, of course, but they talked about the war, and, that was just, some of them didn't talk about the war, but there was this sort of underlying current that this generation had gone through things. And then when I went to France for the first time, to Europe, I saw a whole other side of the war, because this was, Europe, the continent had been occupied, they had fought in a different kind of way. And so I was always trying to think about that. And a lot of my friends, their fathers, their uncles, their grandfathers had fought in the First World War and the Second World War. I knew their mothers. Actually, one of my friend's mothers who lives in the 12th arrondissement, I went to the market with her one day, and there had been topinambur, kind of like a rutabaga, kind of a root vegetable. And I had seen this recipe, and like these chefs were making it with this emulsion and putting seaweed on it, very chic au courant. She goes, I said, let's try that. Let's get one of those. She goes, never. That's all I ate during the war. I don't want that. And I was like, whoa, that's all these kinds of things were jumping out.
Yeah.
And then I was always interested in World War II, and I always heard all these stories. I had these notebooks, but one day, a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I read a book about World War II, and there was a footnote, little teeny footnote, bottom of the page. It talked about Hitler visiting Paris once, and that was it, for 3 hours. He left and he never came back. And I went, why?
Yeah. Listen, I would love to know some more of these stories, that were kind of floating around in your kind of writerly consciousness. And I was reading some reviews of the book today and interviews that you've done, and you said in an interview, you said it's fascinating to see the layers of history under the pavement and cobblestones. And I'd love for also you to talk about kind of these layers of history that you see in Paris and the city.
Oh, thank you. That's a nice quote.
That's a beautiful quote.
Yeah. I think when I went to Paris, when I went to the Marais, maybe.
When did you first come to Paris, Cara?
Well, then you know how old I am. But I came I came 1971. Paris was very different.
Yeah.
And then I lived in Switzerland, in Basel, and I came often to Paris in the 70s, went back in the 80s. Wow, Paris was different in the 80s and in the 90s. So, but there was always something. I think my first love was the Marais, because I went there and it was very dégradé. It was really not cleaned up when I first went. It was like, I don't know how to explain it. It was the buildings were full of soot. They were falling apart.
Wow.
It was, the Marais was so atmospheric. And I couldn't get over that. And there's one off the Rue de Franc-Bourgeois, I think, little impasse Arbaletiers, anyway, where in the 16th century, one of the king's brothers ambushed his brother, and of course the name will escape and someone will remember, and they had a duel and killed him in this little impasse, right? And I was like, so spooky at night. I walked by to go home, and it was like, ooh, I could feel it. Yeah. And then I'd go up, and there was the old synagogue, near Blanc-Manteau, and I was like, this whole feeling of it, this had been more of a shepherd, a ghetto, Jewish ghetto. Yeah. So there's all of these kind of layers, and they're there, or at least I used to feel that. And I always felt I could turn a corner. You never knew what you would find, and there would be a spirit,
Yeah. It's curious because I think, well, a lot of us know Paris today, and certainly the Marais has become this kind of cultural, very cleaned up, very fancy area. So you're kind of evoking this Paris of the past, a lot of us.
Yeah, that was in the 90s, when I really got to go back a lot, and then I started writing Murder in the Marais. It was not cleaned up. There was still the spigot, the water fountain in the courtyard for the whole of this beautiful old funky building. So it was real different.
Yeah. And you set your crime series, that is set in the 90s, from my understanding.
Right. The book that comes out next year, we're all the way up to 2001.
Okay.
20 books we get ahead.
Finally into the 21st century. But this
squeaking in, yes.
But going back to this book, of course, is set in the Second World War. So how did you, after kind of living in France of the 90s, how did you then pivot, and what was your research process for kind of turning, because so many of the reviews kind of commented and noted your research and your process of kind of really embodying that decade. So how did you get into the mindset of 1940, and what was your research process?
Well, thank you. Research is the best part of my job, because I have to go to Paris and go in the archives, talk to people, but I don't know. I've always been very interested in World War II.
Yeah.
And then, again, like going to visit a friend who worked at the prefecture, the major police on Ile de la Cité. And he was like, you want to see the bullet holes? And I said, what? And he opened his window, which is where there is a famous photo of when in 1944, when the French police finally rose up against the Germans and had armed the prefecture. And he said, this is that photo where they're all there and they're leaning out with those guns. And he goes, I'm like, you work here and this is it? And I've always been just amazed or just, I want to get my head around how the past and present collide, and what are the layers and where is it? So I just, I think when I write, and other writers here might agree, you just go back in that time, you put yourself in that situation. What would you do? How would you react? How would it feel? How would it taste? You just put yourself there and go, what would I do?
Yeah.
And I was not a female résistante. I was not, any of those things. But so for me, having Kate being American, who came from rural Oregon, who grew up on a ranch and was incredibly resilient. I mean, ranch work is hard anyway, even now. I mean, but during the Depression. So I wanted someone who could just take, what we call if someone throws her a curveball, has to just make do or make do and mend or whatever you call it. I wanted her to be an every woman. A daughter, a mother, a sister, a wife. And she wasn't the petite fashionista as my other character, Aimée Leduc, is. This woman is big boned and would be noticeable on a French street.
Yes.
So I wanted to put that kind of person, and that really helped me imagine what it would be like and what it would be like fighting for my life. I did go, archives. I went many places. In London, what was really, really incredible was I went into one of the, I think it's the Imperial War Museum, but I can't remember. And you go in and you sit in this tube, and it's like you're in a shelter during the Blitz. There's bombing and there's a shit. It's scary. My friend was with me and she ran out. She was terrified. So really? They do a good job. Anyway,
you were channeling your inner Kate at that point.
Yeah, I was channeling my inner Kate. I was thinking about what do bombs feel like. And then there, of course, is the Churchill's war rooms underneath somewhere in London. That I could put Stepney, who's another character in the book, working there. It was tiny. It was claustrophobic. Just think if people didn't wash very much, everybody was, very pungent. I mean, you think about it. Churchill didn't want the sound of the typewriters, so the keys were padded or felt.
Okay.
I mean, this stuff, you can't make that up.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
You mentioned, I guess, archival research, and then you mentioned conversations with friends, and what I read today is that you have a few friends who were actually themselves in the resistance.
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Sure. The man who is, well, he's probably 92. Wow. He's my pal in the Marais, and he can't walk very well, so we go driving at night because he likes that. And he's not the best driver, but he grew up.
His name?
His name is Naftali Skrobek.
Okay.
Tali. He's my boyfriend, but he has a girlfriend. He's 90 years old and he had a girlfriend he met online, honestly.
Oh.
He's great. He is great. But when I met him, I remember he talked about living in the Marais.
How did you meet him?
I met him through a historical organization in the 10th arrondissement. I was looking for resistance because I had met a few. I also joined historical societies in Paris. I'm a member of the 10th. the one in the patrimoine in the fourth. And I have to pay my dues too, which is, I always like to pay them in person. So I'm a member of the historical societies, and there's always talks at night.
Yeah.
They have yearly dinner. And I met a friend of Tali's who was in the resistance, who sadly has passed away. He's buried, Roger Tunyan, who was a communist resistant.
Oh, wow.
I knew him for years, but he's buried in Père Lachaise. But
Yeah.
so he said, what are you interested? Maybe I know someone. And of course, this was 15 years ago.
Okay.
And he would introduce me, and some people, and I met 2, 3 women, 3 female resistance through him. I met Naftali, who is still my go-to guy.
Yeah.
But just one thing about Naftali, he grew up in the Marais. He's a Polish emigre.
Yeah.
His parents were political exiles. He remembers standing on the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, I think.
Yeah.
When the Germans, maybe he was 10 or 12, when the Germans marched into Paris.
Yeah.
At that time, there were people that had the vegetable and fruit carts,
Yeah.
still. And as the Germans came in, a German soldier bought some bananas, paid money, and gave them to the kids. And Naftali said, the first banana I ever had was given to me by the soldier who marched into Paris.
Wow. 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 Wow.
And his father was beheaded at a German concentration camp.
Yeah. What other anecdotes, I suppose anecdotes that then found their way into the book? Because I imagine it sounds like, you've been kind of doing this research, maybe even unconsciously, for a long time. So what point did you kind of pivot and say, well, I have all these stories and I have all these friends, but how do I turn this into the kind of backdrop of my narrative?
I think it happened. And again, for years, I keep notebooks, and I've said this often, that I have notebooks for the Amy Leduc books, but I'm always hearing another anecdote or a nugget about Paris or Paris during the war that don't fit. I have my other notebooks with those, and I have so many.
Yeah.
And one day I was reading another book about World War II, and I was looking at my anecdotes, and it said, and I have the picture, because sometimes that these men, do you see that?
Yeah.
Hitler with Albert Speer
and
Arno Brecker, okay? He came to Paris, they came for 3 hours, okay? And you can see this on YouTube. After the war, both of the men survived, had served prison times. Albert Speer wrote a biography or recounting. Later, he said that he came with Hitler and Arno Brecker to Paris for 3 hours. We did it on June 28th, 1940. Okay. And in the same book, I was looking for Arno Brecker's account, and he said, no, we came, he wrote in his book, we arrived after signing the armistice on June 23rd, 1940. 2 men together, different times, and they never changed this. And I said, what is with that? There's something there. They never changed their story. What did that mean? I talked to my editor, and she said, well, there's your story. What do you think happened? I said, I think Goebbels did some damage control. I think something happened.
Yeah. That's what I mean. One of the parts that I really, you get to imagine, I kind of highlighted some pages, but you get to imagine what Goebbels was thinking, what Himmler was thinking. You're filling in the imagination of all these very kind of famous historical figures.
And the MI6 files, or MI5, or one is domestic, one is international, are still closed.
Right.
We don't know. Those are not released. What I found when I tried to research this, what if, I found declassified files on section D, like David, that was the precursor to SOE, which many books are coming out, special operations as well. But section D existed before, it had started, and the man who worked in section D was the original Q from James Bond, who developed all those incredible things for James Bond. But the man that he based him on is from section D. A few of those declassified files came out, and I was like, they hired people. They recruited people like Kate Reese.
Yeah. Yeah, so you know, everyone we've been talking about so far, you said, you mentioned that you met a few female resistors through the Historical Society, but most of these, you know, people in the story are men, right? And in largely World War II is a story of it's a male narrative. And so I was curious that you chose a female protagonist, and I thought that, you know, her gender is actually important, you know, in terms of the novel, because there are moments, and I have flagged a moment here where you write, you know, this is her thinking kind of inside. She says, "Play the part," she thought. "Men underestimate women." Stepney said, "Use it." So to what extent is it significant that your protagonist is a woman, and how do you kind of see her gender in relation to this kind of male story?
Right, because I mean, every book I ever read about World War II or every movie, the men are, you know, there's the spy. I like those, you know, I really do. I grew up on those kind of books. My father, John le Carré, which is more Cold War, but followed, and Len Dayton, and I've read all those books, but it's always the man, right?
Yeah.
But if you do research, I mean, and people are doing more research, women did a huge amount during the war because the men were gone, right? They were either fighting, or they were in prisoner of war camps, or they were evading, they were hiding, okay? So the men were kind of out of the picture unless they were in military campaigns. So who's home? I mean, who's home? Women can't just cook and take care of children. The factories have to run, the shops need to open, someone needs to, you know, go do all this work, plus, you know, run whatever, everything needs to keep moving.
Right.
And women, you know, but women, you couldn't, I mean, the great thing was women, you don't suspect a woman who's pushing a buggy with her little shopping bag to be carrying guns instead of a baby. I mean, it's genius, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stories that are coming out now, especially about Virginia Hall, who was an American woman who ran this whole spy network. Virginia Hall was a middle-aged American woman who had a peg leg, I mean, a fake a wooden leg, because she'd lost it previously, and she was never captured. Wow. I mean, she was like evading people. It was like, how could you do that?
Yeah.
And people ask me that a lot, and I think, well, when you get older, women get invisible. You don't know because you're young, but when you get older, you are invisible. So who's going to pay attention to an older woman, or a woman who has a bunch of children, or a woman who's carrying wood and, you know, and water? I have this picture, which I bought at a flea market, and I hope you can see that. Okay. This is in Walmart. Okay, can you see Sacré-Cœur behind? No.
Yes, now on the right, on the top right, yeah.
Okay, look at Sacré-Cœur, 1940.
Yeah.
Look at the women out there getting water from the pails.
Gosh.
You know, bringing them inside. This is not tourist, gorgeous, you know, rose-colored Paris. This is cold Paris in winter during the occupation, 1940.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what women were doing, you know.
Yeah.
So,
where did you get these photographs?
Oh, about a year. I can't remember. 2 years ago. You know, flea market. It was somewhere in Paris. Yeah, this man had them, and I just can I get those? S'il vous plaît. Look at Paris, and these were all look at the Champs-Élysées, kind of like now, right? No one there.
Yeah.
1940. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But these kind of things, and I think it's about women. Women will do what needs to be done. I think one of the characters in the story who runs the corset shop, Gabrielle, I thought about her because she, you know, she's she has children to support. She has, you know, she has to take care of her children, you know. It's a time that was complex, when good people did bad things, when bad people did good things. You never know what we're going to do if your children are hungry, if your mother-in-law is ill. I mean, your husband is in a prisoner of war camp. What are you going to do? You know? And while it never happened to me, I can imagine that, you know, and I think as writers, you kind of go deep inside. When did you have these feelings of this kind of, fear or not knowing what to do, and I think we can all draw on that. Even though I didn't live in 1940, I can pull that out, and I can just remember.
Did you hear anecdotes from friends that helped you kind of channel that fear?
Constantly? Yes. Yes.
You just describe some.
Yeah. Well, there was all different kinds. There was, one isn't so, emotional, but I was in the Irish Cultural Institute with my friend, and there was an old couple, which I love that building, right? I just love that building in the left bank. And this woman and man were talking, and we were just sitting there with my friend Julie, and they were going, yeah, well, you remember what it was like, when we couldn't see anything, the lights were blue, and and I'm like, my ears, I just started in. And I said, oh, what were you talking about? She goes, oh, and they were nice, and I said, and they had a lot of wine, so they were talkative, and they
were Irish, so
Irish. Well, they're Irish French, and then they lived during the occupation, and they had to coat the lampposts and the lights, right, during the war because of the blackout, because planes could fly over. So the beautiful, lanterns, the street lights you see in Paris were blued with paint, and because of that. And that meant that when you're walking, right, you're coming home from the metro, the streets you barely can see. She said, my legs were black and blue because I constantly, everyone had black and blue legs. We couldn't see the pavement, the curb. So we're always falling, we're trying to get home and I thought, I never read about, no one talked about those lights. No one talked about having black and blue, bruises on their legs all during the war. But there were other things. My friend, the woman who lived in Lyon, she was married, she had a child, her husband was prisoner of war. Her father ran a printing press, I believe, in Lyon. And she said she'd take her baby there, toddler, to watch it sometimes. And he said, I can't watch your baby today. I need you to do something to take this. And she goes, okay. So she had her bicycle and she had gone shopping. She had, I think, eggs, and she had her toddler on the back. He goes, I want you to take it out here to the outskirts of Lyon. This is when Klaus Barbie, was the head Gestapo guy in Lyon, at this time. And so she's riding her bike, taking this package out kind of on the outskirts of Lyon. And there was a checkpoint. And the Germans were like, what do you have there? And I go, oh, I got, you can see my eggs. okay, lady, move on. There's other people behind you, right?
Yeah.
She goes on, she gets there, the man meets her. She takes out her eggs and takes out the package, and she hands it to him, and he says, oh, great, the guns are here. Okay. Her father had given her a bunch of guns. I don't know all the details, and she had taken it. And I looked at her and I said, you seriously? You were taking guns? Your father gave you guns? And she said, yeah, what else? And she said, but who's gonna pay attention to me? I have eggs, I have a baby. And that's what women did, and I think later she got, of course, freaked out and probably had a conversation with her father, but there was so many times, and in many situations, people said you did what needed to be done. They didn't want to talk about it after the war. It was no big, I'm not a hero. I did what needed to be done. And maybe these were small, maybe they weren't, transporting guns. Maybe they were, I heard people, and I've heard many, like 3 people came up to me one time after a reading and told me that their mother, their grandfather, their father-in-law had been coming home from school in 1942, wore a yellow star, was going home, and someone on their street or from their building saw them coming home and said, don't go home. Don't go home. Go somewhere else, go to a friend, don't go home. And their parents, their family was rounded up. Times. I know a woman who was in the metro in Belleville, getting off at her stop, at 14 years old, and just going to to get out. and she was with her friend.
Mm.
And her friend, and they stopped. They had patrols, checkpoints on the platform, and they took her friend. I want to see your papers, and he went to her.
Yeah, yeah.
She kept going, and then she stopped because she realized they were taking him away. And one of her neighbors was coming in the metro, and she said, "Don't stop, keep walking. You can't do anything. Keep going." Can you imagine?
Yeah, yeah.
So there was all these kinds of stories, and I'm sure I'm not the only one to hear.
No, well, these are the stories that you would only get, as you say, through conversation. I imagine you're not finding these stories in the archives. And it's, what's so fascinating, Cara, is listening to you speak about these stories with such passion and such knowledge. And it's, we almost forget, like, you spent, you've written 19 of these other novels in this other world. And I just, your passion for this, I think, kind of obscures the fact that you're writing, in a much larger space. So, in your previous work, you would kind of take an arrondissement, and I had this lovely quote that you said in an interview. You said, "The arrondissement is a character and it evokes a place and a time, and kind of embodies a crime that could only happen there." And in this novel, you've had to kind of expand out, and we flit between different parts of Paris. So not only is your sense of space bigger, but also you're now working with a totally new protagonist. I mean, and I love this also. This is another quote that I found today. You said that your old protagonist, it was like being in a long-term relationship with her. Did you feel that you had to kind of, break up with Amy? Did you feel like you were kind of cheating on Amy while you're writing this novel?
Very much so. I felt I was having an affair. I did. I was like, oh. I've been very intimate with this woman for a very long time, and yeah.
Yeah.
And then, my editor and I talked about this because she encouraged me. She urged me to do this.
Yeah.
And I was scared. Okay, I like writing.
Why were you scared? Why were you scared?
Why was I scared? Because it's going into uncharted territory. Sure, I was fascinated by World War II, but writing about it, making it believable, making it plausible, bringing a reader into another time and era, that's another, kettle of fish,
Yeah.
But I had written, I believe it was Murder on the Quay, a couple of books ago, set in the 8th arrondissement, where I did go back and we had a character who went back to 1942. So I had done that.
Okay.
And she said, "See, don't be so afraid. Try some, spread your wings." And I did. So, then I loved it. I loved doing it. But I always admired people who were writing standalone thrillers, and I had never done it. I like doing both. I like writing this thriller. I had a story to tell.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So do you think you'll do it again?
Already have.
Okay. Can you say more? And
I can. My lips are sealed.
I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone that we are accepting audience questions, and I would be thrilled for you to start posting those in the chat at any point, and we can start weaving them in. Sorry, Cara, you were saying that you can't tell us about your upcoming project, although we're all dying to know.
It's with my editor, and but right now we're editing Amy's next investigation. I can tell you about that. That's Murder at the Port of Versailles. It comes out in March 2022, next year. And then maybe you'll get another Kate next year as well. We'll see.
Okay, so you okay, I have a fabulous question from Suzanne, who I think, responding to, don't worry, I'll ask it for you. I think responding to your kind of the moment that you were in the bomb shelter and your kind of experience of the bomb, Suzanne asks, do you do anything special while trying to recreate the sounds and smells and sights of the time to get into character? So we heard about the bomb shelter, but I mean, are you eating kind of the food from the time? Are you listening to the music from the 19th? How extreme is this recreation?
Listen to the music, yes, definitely. When I was writing, yes, I would put on, I would listen to music of that time for sure.
Yeah.
Old, I watched a lot of old British Pathé had a lot of newsreels. Great, right at the time, as it happens, as Italy joins the war, Chamberlain, all these things. So you could, I mean, I could see what British people were actually seeing in the film, in the cinemas, or because they didn't have TVs then, right? Just
Right.
I could see what the newsreels were saying, how people kept on, I could listen to the famous what de Gaulle says, ici, de Gaulle's weekly, or maybe I can't remember how often he did his radio chat. France is calling, or calling France. I could listen to that all the time, and it's really wonderful. It's such catchy.
Yeah, the texture is so, yeah.
And that's how people were informed. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't, of course, they didn't have TVs. They had to wait and hear. I also tried to look, of course, so I like to listen to that. I like to watch those newsreels. I'd like to, and I could just see what someone was wearing, that day. Okay, well, this is a happy photo. End of the war, a little jumping ahead in time. But I could see what people were wearing, what it was like, what was going on. Look at, and I'll show this one. This is the Exodus, 1940, in the first few weeks, they were leaving. Look, they had their cart, the Eiffel Tower. Look how they're dressed. Look what was going on. Look what they took with them. So you can look at photos of that day, the newsreels, listening and hearing a lot of things about bomb shelters, again, going in that simulated bomb shelter. I don't think I do very well in the Blitz at all. I can imagine that happening all the time.
Would you have joined the resistance, do you think?
I'd like to think I would have. I'd like to think that.
Yeah.
But it depends if I had a child or an elderly parent, if I had something that I could offer, I mean, I really would hope that I would. But I don't think people judge themselves as we look back now, judging people. I think it's like, I mean, when you think of what we're going through now during the pandemic, I mean, people look at the health workers, look at the caregivers, look at all the services, those people, it's unsung heroes who do their not so glamorous jobs. They're not asking for, I mean, we owe them so much to them, but they're not asking, for acclaim, but they do what they can, right? They may have, be a healthcare worker. They have a sick mother at home. They have a child that needs to go to school, so they've got to try and do homeschooling, make sure they go and do their job. It's, you do what you can, you know what I mean? You can't say what you would do. It depends on your circumstances. I think right now, it's rising to the occasion. I would hope that I would rise to the occasion, and I would be fueled by an inner sense of justice, anger, probably, and anger. I don't think you can discount anger, during that time or now, how, I would just hope that I could rise to the occasion.
I wonder to what extent you came across, this kind of idea that the resistance was a myth that de Gaulle, kind of created. Certainly there was a resistance and there were many resistors, but the extent to which that all of France resisted, I think, in the historiography, certainly in the 70s and 80s, there was a kind of movement actually led by Americans, Robert Paxton at Columbia, in Vichy syndrome, totally burst the bubble on this idea that all French people resisted. Were you taking into account the fact that, if you speak about the occupation in France and you speak about the Second World War, there's a lot of guilt and kind of complicated feelings, related to this time period?
Sure, but just to jump in there, in the 90s, when I first started, talking, writing my Amy Leduc series, asking people about the war, because the first book does deal with my friend's mother, a hidden Jewish girl. When I tried to get people who had actually, lived there, they didn't want to talk about it. Fair enough. I mean, who am I? It's so different now, really. I mean, and I've been doing.
Why do you think that is?
I think because they're leaving us, These people are 90s. I mean, Naftali talks to me and then I ask him questions and he goes, I told you that. And I go, no, you didn't. But anyway, just kind of like, and, I think they want people to know, or it's like, it doesn't matter anymore. But who am I? I'm just a nosy American, right? I mean, really, just asking for your memories and a time that was maybe very painful to you, but it's changed. And so people are talking more, but it was, and I've said this so many times because I found that this was a game changer when President Chirac gave a speech in 1995. He acknowledged for the first time, France's collaboration with Vichy.
Exactly.
This was huge. I mean, it was in the Figaro. No one had ever acknowledged this. And there's many, and you can read a lot of stories, but de Gaulle needed to unite this country of 400 something plus chiefs. All these different people, such a scarred, they had rationing 10 years in France after after the armistice. So, I mean, after liberation, people were hungry for 10 years. I mean, they didn't have an infrastructure. The Germans had taken all the food, the farming, killed the animals. I mean, they had nothing. They had to unite to again, this agricultural society, which is the backbone of France, to make things, to build things, to get, people with clothes. No one had, they had pre-war clothes. So I think whatever you think of de Gaulle's rationale, he needed to bring this country together.
No, certainly I think, the narrative was a lifeline and it helped him reconstruct a very scarred country in the wake of World War II, and also helped him obviously rise to political power. I have a question from Georgia, who I think, and this kind of goes to your, your ongoing conversations with all of your kind of older friends. Georgia wonders, when people tell you their stories from the time, do you ever check up on what they've told you to see if it's historically correct? I think this is a great, the tension between anecdotal evidence and then historical fact. How do you negotiate that, Cara?
Sure. Well, I'm honored that they would even tell me. And I also go to, I went to a lot of these spoken, when Spielberg made, Schindler's List, and he started the spoken narrative, people would go talk about it, and then it got more fancy, more slick. But I listened to those, but when people told me things, it was like, it's not like I could question them too much. I can't say, is that real? I mean, did you really, have that person knocking you?
You're like, I don't think it was that year. I think it was actually this year.
I have to respect whatever they say. I can ask for clarification because they'll get prickly and they go, I don't want to talk to you, which has happened. So I'm just like, fine, but I mean, I will try and say, oh, okay. And I mean, I've heard some stories about a woman who was a Jewish woman in the 11th arrondissement who was a redhead and who was known as La Roquine, who evidently turned in a bunch of Jewish communist fighters who were killed in the Montluc prison. Anyway, but everyone got very upset when I asked about that because they had a lot of personal involvement with it. But so I have to pull back and I have to say, okay, so then they may talk about something in 1942 or it was 43, and I'll be really interested. Oh, this is what it was like, especially how was the 18th arrondissement? What did it look like? Belleville, where we have the beautiful park now, that was all that was all funky tenement housing that got torn down. My friends lived there and she talked about it. She said, you would never know, but I go, what year was that? Oh, I think it was this. Then we moved there, and I'm writing fiction. I am not writing.
Luckily you have that kind of genre to, if there is a slight, you can say, well, it wasn't really what happened.
It's fiction. Based on real events, true events.
Right. And actually this kind of goes to Nadine's question, because I imagine that throughout all these conversations and throughout all of these observations, you're scribbling everything down into your notebooks. And so Nadine wants to know, can you talk more about how you use your notebooks? I mean, was there any kind of order to the notebooks? How did you kind of, I guess, go through them again for the second, third time? How did you decide what made its way into the book and what you felt was, too much?
Well, I'm honored that she thinks I'm that organized. I am not. I don't have a real rhyme or reason. I just write things down. I can be in the supermarket and I can hear someone talking, and I love that little phrase, and I'll write it down, you know, and I have all these little pieces of paper. I'll have this notebook.
Have you always done that in your life?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just write on something, it's awful, and then I lose it, or I have to paste it. And everyone's going, why don't you use Evernote? I am using Evernote. I mean, why don't you use all these things? And I'm like, yeah, but when I'm on the bus and I'm listening, eavesdropping to the people behind me, I'm like just getting these jewels, you know, he's talking like this and he's telling his granddaughter, it's like that. And I really enjoy that. So I'll just note something.
Yeah.
What I often do now is I tape record with my iPhone,
yeah.
just the sounds in a cafe or what someone says. And I, you know, people, I don't, you know, I'm very careful not to incriminate anyone, but I just take these notebooks, and having written the notebooks, it's like my visits to Paris, when I'm there, I have years and dates in them. And I look at the year. Okay, I remember when I was, you know, in 2012, when I went here and I met that man, and then I look it up. Okay. Or sometimes I just take them and go, I don't know where that is. Yeah. And I start to read them. Yeah. So I wish I was organized. I'm not. And talking about what fits and what doesn't, whatever is either drives the story or moves the story forward goes in the book. Okay. You know, I don't just use things to use them. They need to have a plot point. Yeah. Or suggest.
All of your time, you know, all of your eavesdropping and recording, what's kind of what's one of the most shocking things you've ever come across?
I can't really talk about that. It was someone's infidelity, but I don't want to, you know, talk about that. Well, yeah, one time I was having dinner with two policemen who I've known for a long time. One I know much better, and one of them had gone. He had a call and he had to go out, and outside where were we, on the quay or somewhere, and he went out and he big long talk, and I thought, oh my God, what happened? Yeah. What happened was we went out, my friend, the other cop, we went out because we didn't know it. He was crying. His father had just died down in Lyon. And you know, that was so awful, you know, for anyone. And I remember thinking he's having an affair, but no, it was his father that was in the hospital, and well, actually just, you know, had this sudden heart attack. And it was just, you know, I thought, wow, I don't know if that answers your question, but sometimes you just happen into people's lives. Yeah. And you need to, you know, focus on that. You know, I mean, and then there's people who I meet and we're talking and she's talking and I said, why don't we go? We used to go visit her a lot, or, you know, we used to go hang out with her. What's going on? She goes, well, I didn't hear this, but you know. Yeah. So it's just kind of like you hear personal thing, or we're walking. One time my friend lived in the 14th and we were going into her apartment, and there was of course I was attracted. There's this crime scene tape over the apartment on the next floor, right? There was a crime. And then I was like, what does that mean? They go, well, someone died there and it was a suspicious death. And I'm like, well, what about it? She goes, well, he really right? You know, about who. I was like, did the police talk to you? Because you seem to know a lot about this person. But there's just all kinds of things, you know. And I would never use. I also, when I go out, when I meet police or anyone who will talk to me, I did a lot with the police laboratory for the next book. I became really big friends with the head of the lab, and we would go have, you know, dinner, or we would this, or we would go there. She would suggest ideas. But and I got this incredible tour, and she took my DNA, and it was so great. But it's like I always say to people, if you know, tell me what you feel comfortable with. I'm going to pose some questions. Is this plausible? Would this happen? Can you, or how would you do it? You know, also what's feasible given the time frame. But if there's something you don't, you know, don't tell me, or I will not put it in the story. You know, I always say, please let me know what to keep it, you know, confidential, or, you know.
Do you think that being American helps?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the dumb American. I just say, well, how would you do that? What, I mean, I am a dumb American. I don't pretend to be, but I also have this feeling that you just ask people. And, you know, Americans are open, right? We're supposed to be very open and a lot of one time someone said to me, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but you're so easy. It's so easy to talk to you. And I think I'm just like, yeah, you know.
You're like,
I think,
yeah.
no, I don't. Yeah, but I think if you're really interested, and I'm really interested in what people have to say, I'm not pretending.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't want to take their time if it's not, you know, and if they don't want to talk to me, and people haven't, okay, you know, thanks for meeting me, you know, I understand, or another time, or you know. Sometimes I'll meet someone and then I leave and I don't get to see them until I go back to Paris 6 months later in normal times. And I'm like, I've been thinking about this and could you answer? And they're going, yeah, but you know, this is my friend who can help you more. So a lot of times what I discover on one visit is an intro to another person who's back from vacation. And then I can meet them in person.
Okay. How have you kept up these relationships and these contacts in times of COVID and not in-person interactions?
Signal, the app Signal, WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that people are as open using online tools as they would be in person? I mean, I imagine that some of these kind of secrets and these stories that people are telling you, that kind of thing that needs to be in the room, or maybe not.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you don't feel people like you do when you're in person. But I mean, I'm just talking about, I'm not doing big research now. I had to do a lot of research with the FBI and somebody, an operative in Algeria, was amazing. And so we had to do a lot of talking over the Zoom. I mean, but usually, yeah, I mean, I'm just talking about friends or people in Paris, you know. I mean, a lot of people are like, I'm just so tired and I have nothing important to say. My little, you know, I'm in quarantine. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
I actually, I found through, it was an amazing circular way to meet this man who'd been working for Interpol in the 80s when Interpol was headquartered in Paris, in Boulogne-Billancourt, before they moved to Lyon. And there's a whole political issue about that. And so he talked to me from Algeria, where he was working. I don't know, couldn't ask him what he was doing. He said, you don't want to know what I'm doing. I go, I don't want to know what you're doing. But I was there in Interpol in the 80s. And I'm like, okay.
Judy wants to know, and this might be a good transition because we actually prepared a kind of fun little poll for people to fill out based on your book, Cara. But Judy wants to know, once travel is allowed again, what's the first place in Paris that you'll be going to? What have you missed the most about?
Only one? I can only pick one.
I see Judy shaking her head. Maybe you get 3 or 2. Two.
Well, you know, if I'm landing in Orly and then I take the bus and I get into Denfert-Rochereau, then I know I'm going to go right to that cafe there and I'm going to hop out and sit outside at a terrace. And, you know, it's not my favorite cafe, but I will go to my first cafe.
Okay.
And before I get the metro to go to my friends, if I come in at Charles de Gaulle and I take the Roissy bus, you get off at Place de l'Opéra, I am going to go for the first time ever to Café de la Paix, right there, because I've never had enough money to have cafe.
Judy's giving you a big thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm gonna go and have an outdoor cafe, and then I'm gonna take the metro and go to my friend's house.
Okay.
I'm gonna go to a cafe and sit on the terrace.
Oh, I know. Well, we hope you'll be able to do that soon, Cara. So we actually have we made some fun polls.
Okay.
Can you all see this? Okay, so we wanted to ask the audience, and you're very welcome to chime in too. What would you do if you had 3 hours in Paris? And so I don't know if you can see this. Everyone's welcome to fill in what they would do. I see people looking at their screens, please.
How do I do it? Do I click it?
Yeah, you click it. Yeah. And then we also asked how many Cara Black's novels have you read? So we wanted to find out that too. A lot of people want to explore the Marais. People want the Jardin de Luxembourg. Let's see. Nobody wants to eat a crepe in the, oh, one person, the Latin Quarter. Let's see. What's the most popular? Most popular so far, picnic in Jardin de Luxembourg. And 11 people have read 10 or more of your novels, Cara.
Wow.
We've got
Thank
some
you.
super fans in the audience.
Thank you.
What would you do, Cara, if you had 3 hours in Paris only? Not looking at the poll. We leave the poll.
Well, I would I'd go pick up my friend's daughters from school. That's right near the Jardin de Luxembourg on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I'd pick the girls up. I'd take them, as I have done often, take them into the Jardin and get them, what they like now, those gaufres, like those waffles.
Like the waffles? Yeah.
They're into, I would get them that. And then they would run around and then we would hop on my scooter and I'd take them home. Weaving all through Paris.
Lovely, lovely. So you would make sure that you have a tour of Paris and get to all the spots. The hot
right, with my friend's daughters on the back of my scooter.
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Yeah. Okay, so I can announce that the most popular was Picnic in Jardin de Luxembourg. Read Next to the Seine is second, which, you know, for a library of an audience of library goers, that's great. And Browse Titles at the American Library in Paris is third. So we hope to, hello?
That's my husband. He's going away. He wanted to see what your list is. So cute.
Oh,
right? I like that idea.
And then we have 11 people who read 10 of your novels. Cara, that was a kind of silly end to a wonderful talk. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Thank you for everyone for being in the audience. We hope you enjoyed this wonderful event. A few things as we end today's call. Thank you for your audience engagement. Thank you for your questions. We hope to see you again soon for another program. Please visit our events page to browse our upcoming events. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you that the American Library in Paris is an independent nonprofit, and we suggest that you donate 10 euros per person per event if possible. And please use the link in the chat or in the email that you received today to make that donation. Thank you in advance. Evenings with an Author is sponsored by Grow at Annenberg. I will now share with you a short history of our library. So Cara, you can say goodbye. And
thank you so much, everyone. And I'm sorry not to see you in person. I hope next year, whenever, I'll see you all in person. Thank you so much.